Welcome to Hospitality Talks. My name is Sam-Erik, and I'm with my partner in crime here, Abid. But first of all, I wish everyone good health, warmth, strength, and resilience. Together, we will do more to get through this, and we will be better than ever before through this resilient and unified spirit here on a global basis. Now, this is our second episode of design, and I'm very excited that we have such a global network between Abid and myself, that we have architects, designers joining from around the world. And in this segment, I will let my Abid to introduce our panelists. Please go ahead, Abid.
Thank you, Sam. Hope your day has been great. I know you and I ourselves are about 6 hours apart, but thanks to technology, we're all together, even when most of the world is having to hunker down and stay at home. Good afternoon, everybody, or good day to people, because folks are joining us from all over the world. Great to have you back with Hospitality Talks. As Sam said, this is our second of the 3 series talks that focus on design, particularly as it relates to post-COVID days. How do we learn to live with the coronavirus? How do the hotels and hospitality establishments start to open up? What different things will it have an impact on design as we move forward? We've got 3 panelists from different parts of the world with tremendous experience on different types of establishments that they have designed. So if it's okay, let's get started. And I would like to start with Willem van Bolderen, who is partner at Studio Puisto Architects. Willem, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor to join you and to talk about the topics that you just mentioned.
Superb. Well, thanks for joining us. I know just before we got on the air, you were mentioning about getting snow yesterday, which weather patterns all around the world are changing dramatically. But I believe that plays straight into the work that you have done, and we'll get to that in a second. You have been involved in designing these resorts at remote locations, beautiful locations, eco resorts, looking after the carbon neutrality. But before we get into the specifics of it, could you please tell us the evolution of eco resorts and some of the trends that have developed over the last decade, Willem?
Yeah, thanks for the time. And indeed, like with eco resorts or resorts in general, of course, we're all looking for special experiences, and we want to have a unique experience. And what better places to go is than there's nature or the corners of the world. Think of Lapland or a desert or Montana, the mountains. And the trend is, of course, like, you want to experience that place, and then you wonder, how can a building support that experience that you have there? How can the building give you even another level of experience on top of that? And I think we are, and then there's of course the element like, what do you take home from it? What image can you share with your family? What image do you share with your beloved ones or on social media? So the travel doesn't only start when you book the trip, but it continues like long after you've returned home.
Well, this sustainable designs and eco resorts are fairly recent in the industry. Can you tell us how the movement might have begun and some of the elements that you look into in your own design philosophy while you work on these projects?
Well, we're dealing with really sensitive landscapes where we build. So those are places where the nature grows slowly, where if you add a lot of damage, it might take tens of years for it to recover. So we have to treat really sensitive, and then the building should have as little impact as possible. And of course, we are dealing with both the impact of the building itself, but also the operations of the hotel itself. So we are thinking of how can we minimize the impact both during operations and during construction. And of course, if you think of the ecosystem, that's both the nature but also the local community. So how can this hotel help the local community supply work, supply a constant flow of resources throughout the year? So we have to look at the whole package. So it's not only eco materials, or it's not only trying to not wash the towels too often, but you have to look at the whole package.
Well, in some ways, though, resorts in general, but particularly these eco resort developments, I would think that they would be best suited to operate in this world with virus. And when I think about it, I think about out of the beaten path developments that the population is not that high. I think about low density, possibly. I think about beautiful scenery and beautiful locations. Do you think there is a harmony with where we are operating today?
Yeah, I think you are exactly right. Like probably the more remote locations, the less densely populated locations will be the first ones to probably attract new guests. Also because social distancing is easy, but of course also there the experience is not so much about meeting other people, but it's about being one with nature. And nature itself, of course, doesn't cause you the virus. So I think that would be definitely one side of it. The other part of it is, of course, also that this has created a lot of anxiety to people, and maybe a place to rewind and to slow down might actually be better than the center of a bustling city at this moment, or something that we're all longing for, like a place where we can relax and actually stop listening to the news for a while and settle our eyes on the landscape.
Stop listening to the news is a bit of a challenge, because there is so much of it and so much of misinformation at times that it becomes overwhelming. And I'll turn it over to my co-host in a bit. But Willem, in terms of finishes and construction materials, particularly with these eco developments, I know you've been designing some of the carbon neutral developments. Can you talk a little bit about that? What types of materials do you seek out, and what works best in these developments, please?
Yeah, very good point. And of course, the material has a huge impact. Actually, construction might be up to 40% of the total energy consumption that the building has over its lifespan. Depends a little bit where you build. But there's two parts of it. So local materials are, of course, good because you save so you stay local, you save on transportation, etc. But also, if you think, for example, in Scandinavia, timber is an excellent choice because it stores CO2 and it's a renewable energy. So if you chop a tree, it will grow back. And actually, if you take it from a sustainable forest, there will be more wood returning to what's taken down. And then the hotel is actually able to store all that CO2 rather than releasing it into the atmosphere. If you think of concrete and steel, for example, it takes such a tremendous amount of energy to create that should, of course, there are certain parts that have to be made of steel or have to be made of concrete, but trying to limit that to a minimum.
And absolutely, you know, this coronavirus has spurred a lot of these conversations about sustainability. It has been talked about in the industry for a long time, but it has become front and center today. Let me turn it over to Sam. Sam, over to you.
Yeah, Willem, what is that influences you the most right now when you are planning some architectural work? What are the specific things that, in your view, are very important for you, considering what we're going through at the moment with the COVID and so on?
Well, I think the resilience that was briefly mentioned in the introduction, I think that's something that, like a building, when we build it, it's going to last 50, 100, 150 years. So we're building far beyond what we're thinking of at the moment. And now it's COVID-19, but there will be much more challenges thrown at us. And buildings will outlast the designers and the people that stayed there. And I think we have to take that resilience or flexibility of a building into account. And I think, of course, COVID-19, it's terrible, and a lot of people are suffering from this. But we can also think, like, can we take something positive out of it? And maybe something like slow travel might be coming up. So changing destination every day, maybe we should fly to one good destination a year and spend a lot of time there and really try to go through all the levels of the environment that the hotel or the resort or the location that you chose has to offer. So I think this will be the start of a change, and a change hopefully for the good, where we kind of take not only ourselves but the whole environment into the consideration.
Very good. And what has been, since you have done a number of projects which are in sort of isolated locations and so on, what has been some particular challenges in your recent work because of this situation?
Well, from a technical point of view, it's of course that it's very hard to access. So getting the right craftsmanship, getting the materials out there, those are challenges. But nowadays, of course, we can prefabricate, we can use other machines to build it offsite and then transport it to the location, so as to have as minimal impact on the site as possible. But then I think it's also very important to build a level of education into it. So if the visitor comes there, how can this building actually help explain the challenges of the nature around it, of the challenges of the locals, etc. So that we help to educate both from a sustainable perspective, but also of the environment that you're in.
Very good. And maybe you can mention some of your favorite recent projects that you are involved with. So just to understand for the viewers, what is the scope of work that Studio Puisto is involved with?
Maybe our most known project is the Arctic Treehouse Hotel, which is just above the Arctic Circle. That's a luxury resort that has several units, and that we've really designed based on the guest experience. So from the moment that you arrive, so what do you see, what do you feel, what do you smell, what do you touch, and then to kind of build a contrast from one to another. So on purpose, we have, after you check in, you have to go back outside, and it can be minus 30 degrees up there. And while you go through the cold landscape, you run back in, you climb up, and then there's kind of a nest waiting for you. And that nest is then warm and comfortable, and you stare at the end of the world at the northern light. And building in that contrast, if you didn't experience that cold, you won't appreciate the warm. And I think that's what we're trying to find in all our projects. So the transition from one place to another, and that goes much further than only the building. We try to take the environment into that account as well. We are also developing at the moment a private retreat up in Montana in the US, and that's much more off-grid, so where you really have to kind of carry the wood, take the water, use the creeks, and that's really like you have to work to live that place, and that's all part of the experience.
That's very exciting. So what do you consider to be your greatest source of inspiration in your work?
I think we're trying to find it really close. So the inspiration is the direct environment around us. Like basically you travel to Lapland, actually not for that hotel. You travel there to be in the snow, to be in the cold, to see the reindeer. So preferably you would do it without a hotel. That would be the purest experience. But the weather can be pretty challenging all over the world. It can be too hot, too cold, too damp, a lot of rain, etc. So we need shelter. And then whilst we are starting to build that shelter, we can also think, can this shelter actually help us to take even more out of this nature? For example, staring at the northern light, you could only do that for 5 minutes in the winter. But thanks to a hotel and thanks to a skylight, you can actually stare at it for the full night because you're out of into a comfortable nest.
Very good. Well, thank you for those. And Abid, over to you.
Well, when you look at sustainable development in these resorts in off the beaten path areas, glamping comes to mind, and there was a massive movement with glamping that became really, really popular. I know you have worked on developing a similar product, and if my memory serves me correctly, you branded it Space of Mind. Can you talk a little bit about that as to how that prefabrication works and the application of that product to hotels?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you go to a hotel or you go to a remote hotel, you're looking for an escape and you want a place that is as close to nature as possible. And we were thinking, like, and especially in times like this when everybody is hunkered down, as you said, we thought, like, how can you have a mini holiday, maybe even in your own garden or in the nature quite close to you, and a place where you can rewind and think and close your computer. So that's why it's called Space of Mind. It's as small as we could make it, and it's modular. So you can actually, because rewinding might mean different things for different people. So some people go to the gym, others have yoga, other people read books, other ones want to crank out emails, and that makes them relax. So everybody deals with these things differently. So we came up with a modular system that you can place on remote locations, but also in the backyard, on the top of your building, or in a courtyard, and that's a place where you can relax and rewind. So it's like the super concentration of what a hotel stands for, as close to you as possible. And these units are prefabricated, so they can be moved anywhere, and we made them as small as possible because in most locations around the world, you can place them without a building permit. So it's but with all the comfort of a real house in a way. So it's glamping for the ones who don't like camping.
I understand it has creating a buzz now in the media. Can you just share how this is being perceived at the moment? Because it's kind of a very current idea that you have, and now also has created interest in a number of people.
Yeah, actually, like yesterday, I saw it coming by on an Australian blog, and yesterday I talked to Monocle magazine about the same thing. And I think it's because we're working from home, or most of us are working from home. So you're taking work home, but in a way, you also, when you're working from home, you take home to work. So once you look up from your computer screen, you think laundry, you think dishes, you think a kid might need to eat, or stuff like that. And actually, once you look up from your computer screen or from whatever you should be doing, it might be really good to have this kind of space of mind, literally, to be able to empty your head. And normally we do that in a holiday, but we actually should build it in throughout the day. And I think the current times really make us realize that these moments are very important, and we are not able to travel at the moment, or most of us are not. So we have to build those into our daily routines, I think. So normally you're longing for a holiday, maybe now you're longing for staring at a tree or at a bird close by.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I'm watching every morning, because right now with this spring being, I see the birds here next door fighting about the nest, and somebody's trying to steal the egg. And I would say for my adult life, I haven't really followed spring in the same way as I've been following it now. So it's really fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big trend. Slow TV, slow cooking, slow life. I don't know, but hopefully that's something positive that we can take out of this.
Yeah.
I think that pace, or slower pace, or lack of pace, is causing additional stress on some people. So it's the matter of balancing that. That was fabulous, Willem. We really appreciate that. There are a couple of more questions, but I will get back to you. Let me bring on our next guest. So please stick around, because we will come back in a little bit to ask some of the more questions. Our next guest, Gracinha Viterbo, who is partner and creative director with Viterbo Interior Design. Gracinha, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you so much for the invitation, to both of you.
Thank you. Nice to have you here.
Well, great to have you here. Thanks for taking the time. I know you grew up in a design environment with your mother being a designer. So you sort of had that embedded in you from the very early stage. Can you, when you look at some of the developments that your mother might have worked, or hotels that you might have seen, and things that you're doing, can you talk a little bit about the design evolutions, and particularly the boutique movement, how that came about, since you've done a lot of work in boutique environment?
Yes, especially in the boutique environment, or niche environment, if we don't want to say, if boutique has been overused. But yes, you're right. I grew up in the industry. I was then trained and did my degrees in London. and I designed a little bit all over the world, Asia, Africa, and mainly in Portugal. I have to say that, I really did have a very good experience looking at the past. My mother designed the big landmark hotels in Portugal all through the 80s and 90s. I'm more specialized in the smaller and more personalized kind of experiences in hotels, and I see a big difference between both in terms of personalizing the experience, crafting each moment, surprising the client. I think at the beginning, in the past, it was more about the impact and the grand, overall image of the hotel. And nowadays, it's more about the detailed moments and the surprising. I relate very much to what Willem was saying in terms of experiencing moment after moment in surprising and enhancing the senses through the design of the project. And I think these are, the big differences between the design of the past and the design today. We can look at design philosophy by themes, looking at the eco resorts or the sea or urban or a countryside, but more and more we're looking at personalized experiences.
Well, the classics have been around and they'll probably be around, but the quote unquote boutique movement was very design centric. It was almost as if we threw out the old concepts and brought in new things on space utilization and how to create that ambience. You talked a little bit about your design philosophy, but help us understand some of the critical components of designing in these specialized, personalized environments that now define the boutique movement.
I think that in the boutique movement, the designer has a chance to dissect the layout into special moments and to create new moments that you might not have in a big hotel or a more commercial type of hotel. So, new concepts were created that weren't imagined before, like the bar in the lobby, or, creating, now it's like a supermarket in the gas station. No one thought about it before. And the hotels are always, and the designers are always trying to create these new connections between spaces that will relate to the investment of the client and to their to what they want to take out from the business, but giving that special experience to the client. As Willem was saying, he will take it with him home. I think clients are getting more and more demanding on having those experiences and are expecting new experiences through the design. So I think the creative solutions that designers have to reinvent are getting more exciting until now.
Well, the boutique movement, to a great extent, at least in US terms, came about as a result of adaptive reuse. Some of these old buildings that had outlived their useful life were being retrofitted into hotels, and they came up with absolutely stunning design. But space utilization is a huge issue in these hotels. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because public areas play a critical role in creating that experience. And how do we take that forward with COVID-19?
I'm actually quite positive about this. I think that as creative minds that we are, designers will start very quickly to get to new solutions to adapt whichever that the clients want. And I even think that will be a new service in interior design offices, the consultations, the creative direction of hotels that have already invested a lot in their interiors that really don't want to change everything again, but will have to readapt layouts, or will have to create new lounge areas because you can't have very big groups. So I think there will be a new approach to interiors, in redirecting what already exists, but doesn't have to be completely changed if it has been done recently, for example, which is very important also for the investment of the hotel owner.
Sam, over to you.
Well, I'm fascinated about various projects that you have developed over the years. So I'm curious, what is sort of your greatest source of inspiration when you create something?
I think location and story, the authenticity of place, for me is very important. I usually say, every client has a style, every project has a story. And there's a code between who the client is, who the audience is going to be, and what we want them to take out of the place they're in. Not just, physically, but also emotionally.
Yeah, the customers, they want to be surprised and delighted with a different experience. Can you just share some things that you have developed? Because now people are getting more and more critical about what they are experiencing in what we call the boutique environment. Just share a couple of things that for the viewers who are not fully familiar of the great work you have done.
Yes, so I've done hotels near the sea, hotels in Lisbon, in antique palaces. Some have only 14 rooms, some have 50, 100 rooms. And depending on the size, we will get to experiences such as, for example, if it can be the smallest, most beautiful spa in the world. So you can have a pool for two, for a couple that has to book to have their experiences in that special moment. So we create these moments in a very special ways. For example, one that I think might be a new trend now with COVID is the lobby might start being in the garage. And why not start looking at the garages and where the cars go in as a spectacular new place to design, and the client can go direct to their room, for example. The spa can come to your room. I'm already starting to create these new ideas that can be applied post-COVID.
That's very good. I think that just is a sign of a designer who thinks and feels what the customer is looking for. So that's very nice to hear what you're saying. Over to you, Abid.
Gracinha, in particularly in these boutique environments, food and beverage plays a critical role. Well, generally speaking, hotels have been used as anchors in the community, but these boutique hotels are pivotal from that point of view, and food and beverage and a gathering place and a socializing place is very important. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit to that as to how do we keep, in the immediate terms, how do we keep the social distance but yet create that energy in these places?
Well, I will always I would say that now the experiences, in boutique hotels is going to be even more personalized. I think it will come not just because of design, but also because of service, and they have to get together in a way to create maybe instead of having one bar where everyone will gather, maybe there will have to be a readjustment of scattering a little bit these experiences of food and beverage all through the public areas. It might be an exciting new solution to look at through the hotel business side.
Any finishes that you think would be more utilized moving forward? I know hotels are all about high touch and very high design elements, while we try to learn from hospital operating systems, but nobody wants to go to the hospital. Everybody wants to come to a hotel. Yes. So how do we learn some of the best practices, but be able to execute them in hotel environment?
I think first step is I think designers will have to step up their knowledge into hygiene and all the procedures that are right now the norm and the new norm, and then start kind of dressing them up with aesthetics and curating beauty around them, but it will be the new norm. So we will have to look into ways of creating safety. And clients will be maybe a little bit with fear at the beginning, and the creating new ideas of safety and of being safe in the environment is definitely one of the priorities right now. Maybe in the lighter colors, people see that it's clean. Portugal is a little bit ahead because we are reopening right now. So from 1st of June, the hotels will also be reopening and the restaurants. So we've gone through the confinement and we are already talking a little bit further into this matter because hotels and restaurants are reopening. And for example, our Board of Tourism has developed a seal of health and safety that hotels are publishing, that when they are compelling with all the norms, that's already bringing safety into the client visiting. He knows it's safe, it's clean, and then the materials will help as well.
Yeah, some of the hotels now, because of this, they will set the procedure or have set the procedures already in place for increased cleanliness. I mean, beyond what they have been done before. So in the operation, they're expecting that it will take 50% more time to clean a room because from the guest point of view, he wants to create the feeling he should have when you walk into the room. This is a room that no one has slept in before, so it's only just for him. So it has to do with the fragrance and just have the stellar cleanliness. And I was just talking to one of the hotel chains, and they were saying that this basically means that we'll add 50% more time just to make sure that to get the procedure right, and that is but also of course are communicating this to the customer, so people know that what to expect. So it's not only some paper banner on the top of on the toilet, any of that, but it's actually going much beyond that with any stickers and so on.
Sam, it's funny you bring up that paper seal that used to be around the toilet seal. Believe it or not, I think it's Hilton that has just announced that seal on the doors. So after the room gets clean, they are going to put that seal up. Technologically, Amazon, for example, has recently introduced a robot that is equipped with UV lighting that goes up and down their warehouses to kill the pathogens. And some of those technologies will have to be implemented somehow in hotels. But, the carpets that are around, what do you do with them? You can't get rid of them because it acts as a sound barrier. But yet cleanliness is important. Great conversation, Gracinha. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please stick around. I would like to bring our next guest on at this particular point, and then we'll come back to you with some additional questions. So let me welcome Meriam Hall, who's founder and creative director of Meriam Hall Designs. Meriam, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you all for welcoming me here. And I'm very happy to meet you and meet my other peers. And it's I'm passing after them. I kind of going to repeat what you said, so which is good.
Well, it's okay to be controversial at the same time, Meriam.
You seem to be we're like-minded, but yeah, there will be probably a little bit of controversy, and maybe we're going to play the bad scenario.
Meriam, you have done a lot of work in resorts, some island resorts, whether it's Maldives, whether it's Haiti, in Indonesia. You've done a lot of work in beach-type facilities. So walk us through some of the design development over the last decade as to what's that been like and some of the changes that you might have seen in design throughout the last decade.
I would think that really what has changed since I would say the first resorts I've designed. Being a bit older, I started, and I'm kind of in a new trend right now. I think when, for example, we did the St. Regis in Bora Bora, it was the first St. Regis resort. So all was new, and it was pretty much at that time to reproduce a spread out kind of city hotel. I mean, and the requirements from the operator at that time were like to have a boardroom with fabric panels and carpet. So of course we had to adapt that to Tahiti. I mean, it's and the weather. So at the time, it was, I would say, a bit more traditional. We had the big all-day dining, for example, the reception, and the rooms. I mean, I'm lucky they were very big, 120 square meters the room. So that was really cool.
That's a villa.
Yes, I'm very fortunate. Even the let's say the mid-scale resorts I've done are all with big villas. It's actually because, frankly, I would think that a proper resort needs space, and actually a proper resort is the right setup for the COVID. I mean, in terms of the space and what you look for. But I would say that what has really evolved lately is, and I could see around, is the creation of the story. Being a storyteller myself, I mean, I started as a set designer, scenographer in Paris. I was designing exhibitions and worked for operas and theater. So to me, the story was the normal way to design a hotel. That's why I design hotels, because for me they're books. They're books, and I have a story, and all the spaces are chapters. And Willem, the space in between is just when you touch the page and you turn it. So that's the space in between. So it depends on the quality of the paper. And the light that comes on it. Yes. So that is what I've been doing lately. But I have my latest resorts were in Maldives, and they were great because small number of rooms, and it was really about creating the experience. Mostly because the more you multiply the number of resorts, which is we have zillions of them now, the more you're multiplying brands, the more you need to be better and better in creating that experience and that story. So we received some good awards for one of them, and I'm proud of it because I stayed in. I liked it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I must tell you that is a great analogy that I've heard of hotels. Well, hotels are all about theatrics at the same time. Whilst you compared the design to a book, but there is tremendous amount of theatrics that are involved in it, particularly when you go to luxury resorts and the large spaces and sparsely populated developments. One of the things that had become very common in luxury resorts was the size of the bathroom. Can you talk a little bit about that as to how that evolved and some of the design elements in the beach resorts and the bathrooms?
I mean, it's of course, and mostly, I would say before. I'm not talking before and after COVID. I'm saying before and before COVID. Bathrooms were like making you would make the statement through the bathroom. I think first ones were an adaptation of a hotel bathroom, but just making it bigger by the size and making it more open to the outside. I mean, we have a scenery outside in a resort, so we need to play with it. But what happened recently is that we became even more creative with these bathrooms. So we have exploded them. So you would have a bathtub somewhere, a vanity somewhere else. I mean, there is a hotel I've done in Tahiti, in Maldives, Finolu Villas, where I actually just divided the bathroom in a way that we have an indoor space, we have a patio where you have the bathtub, and actually where you have a daybed and you can have your massage, so your spa coming to your room. and then we only enclose, you know, the WC, because all the rest, I mean, it's a sexy place. It's an adult-only resort, so it's all about that sexiness coming in and out. So this is really a huge trend we're seeing in resorts. I mean, mostly the Bali-inspired bathrooms. I mean, you know, once you've seen a bathroom in Bali and the weather permits and the square meters permits, you'll do it. I mean,
you know, having traveled all around the world, every time I've been to a place like Bali or Phuket or through Scandinavia, every time I go there, I say, I love this architecture. Then I go to the next place and I say, I love this design. And then I go, and whilst they're very different, but all of them have great characteristics, and involving those design elements is what truly creates the space. Resorts, as you brought up, are possibly built to live in harmony with whatever pandemic that is going on, because they're so sparsely developed, and there is lots of spaces and people have got large rooms. Do you think that this pandemic would bring about any particular design change in that, and or any finish changes that will have to be talked about?
I mean, of course, we can go extreme, and we would say that, you know, upholstery, the regular upholstery, our throw cushions, our little, you know, elements that makes the little poetry around the room maybe they're going to disappear. So we will have to be a bit more creative on all the rest. I would think that lighting is going, if the room becomes more minimal, if the materials we're going to be using are less soundproofing, less absorbing, we would need to create better acoustics in the construction, and in the same time play with the light that you still feel some warmth. Probably with music, because music doesn't not carry virus, okay? So we can play with music and sound. I would think that, I mean, for luxury resorts, we were usually using stone and timber. I mean, for construction, that's mainly the material. We know now, for example, that copper and brass are very good materials to use with a virus, because with the COVID, because they do not keep for a long time. So, you know, owner budgets permits, we will be even using more brass and more copper. I mean, it's something that could be interesting. I think we will, as my colleagues were saying before, we're going to be creative. You know, we will get the requirements and we will adapt, because that's our job, is to still create the experience, because at the end, I wake up in the morning because of that experience. If I can't do it, I can't create emotion, then what I'm doing? Then we go and build hospitals. I think we'll find a way. We'll find a way. But resorts are, I would say, if you would have asked me about city hotels, it would have been trickier to me, right? Because then mostly the refurbishments are going to be difficult to adapt. Resorts we have spaces.
I have a question.
The change will not be for the rooms and the accommodations. I think it's mostly for the public areas.
Yeah. I have a question now. When you go to a new location and a new project, how do you start? What is the sort of source of inspiration that you put together, maybe in your small notes and so on, before you start to? How do you visualize it from your point of view, design process?
The first thing is I go to the place, because I need to feel. I'm an architect by training, so I need to feel the soil, the land, and the area. And mostly I you know, through the kickoff meeting, I get to meet the clients. I'm lucky, I always work remotely in different cultures, so I immerse myself in their culture. Maybe you're going to laugh, but first thing I need to fall in love with everybody, because that's the first start of that emotion that starts, and then usually I go home after I've seen all this. I go home and for days I wonder. My brain wanders. My spirit goes all over. And then comes usually in the same time my pen starts to draw. I start to draw layouts and this and sketches and I'm all over the place. And then and then comes a story. And frankly, of course, I study the brand DNA, the local culture. I do lots of research, but at first it's not oriented. And then one day comes up the story. And sometimes I even surprise myself. So it's, and then it's the starting point. That's what I do.
That sounds like a great journey in your design process.
Oh, I love it.
Spoken like a true designer, Meriam. I have a world of respect for your profession and all the designers that do to create this life into these hotels and resorts. I've always said that if I was ever to design a hotel, it'll turn out to be a jail. Having said that, I have stayed at a converted jail in Helsinki, as a matter of fact, and it was a very nice hotel.
Yeah, of course. The thing is that, why am I talking about falling in love? Is because when we talk about experience, there is no experience if we don't create emotion. So emotion has to be from before. I need to fall in love with my project too, before even I can make people buy into it and fall in love with it. And, many times, the fact that you make people really buy into it, be passionate about it, be passionate about that story. Of course, I build a story. Okay, so it's not only about the story, but then we get visuals. I'm very particular about design details, construction details, etc. Because I want to build that story, exactly that one. The thing is that it happened to me to be that. On any project, we had difficulties. We had budgets were no more there or a difficulty. And frankly, every time, the whole project team, owners, operators, managers, everyone, I've seen everyone fighting in order to build as close as possible to that thing they all fell in love with. So it's and we did it. In India it happened a few times.
Well, the whole conceptualizing of these hotels and then bringing it together is a really Herculean task, and there are a lot of different times in that process that it can get derailed, but thanks to folks like you and like Willem and like Gracinha, that at the end, a fabulous product comes together. I think this is a great segue into possibly bringing everybody together. And you brought up the talking point of budgets. Designers have always been blamed to want to have more money, and developers are always saying, no, you got to cut. Take this out, because possibly the numbers don't pan. And maybe I'll throw this question out to Gracinha first. How do you balance the creation of this masterpiece, if you would, versus the fiscal responsibility that the owners are worried about?
Well, I think first of all, I relate so much to everything that was just said. It's good to know we're not alone. I completely relate with what you said. You said it very well. And answering to your question, which is a very important point, of course, nothing is done without a budget. I think it's important that I think miracles can happen and that designers can find solutions not to lose their ideas. And I believe that the ideas that don't stay were not meant to stay in that story, but the ones that are really important, we have to fight for. And sometimes the solution is not getting rid of the most expensive ideas, rather than letting those that have more impact stay, and then reviewing the ones that can be swapped into other ones that can make it more into the budget that the client wants.
Well, Meriam, back to you. You have obviously done a lot of work in Asia, culturally speaking, in Asia and Middle East, maybe not so much in the Mediterranean or US, but buffets are a huge offering, particularly for breakfast. Without buffets, the breakfast is non-existent. How do we deliver that experience that the customer wants with COVID-19 in the works?
First of all, buffet, I mean, I've tried as much as I can since many years to kind of split them around, spread them around, eliminate them little by little, because I think, frankly, I mean, I know it's a big selling point, but I think there is not really, I mean, the traditional buffet with all the food exposed, it's not really an incredible experience. So we've seen already that when you get more into the luxury segment, we've seen buffet becoming chef stations. Already, that's a little bit more human, I would say. And unfortunately, I think if we're going to be extreme in the vision of the after COVID, okay, that healthcare kind of philosophy, we won't have any more buffet, because you can't expose the food, you won't be able to cook in front of others, and people won't be able to queue. So, I mean, obviously, buffets and sharing food, you know, the new community kind of before COVID thing, co-working, co-eating is also going to disappear. I mean,
well, you are absolutely correct. We're going to have to think this whole offering through. And I must confess my personal bias. If buffets go away, I, for one, will not be heartbroken, because I always thought the buffets were hoteliers' lazy way of feeding masses. It doesn't really impart in the experience. William, one question for you, and I'll turn it over to Sam after that. In these remote locations and developments that you do, how do you bring these food and beverage offerings into place? How do you keep that carbon neutrality into place so that the experience is there, but it's done in an operational way to reduce the impact on the environment?
Well, actually, like that's a very good point, and in a way, the building is living off the land and we're eating off the land. So part of it is also that the chefs take maybe already during the afternoon the guests into the landscape, find some of the ingredients, some out of the nature, and have people cook with it, or at least cook with the ingredients that you just found. So it's not only the food that you take, but how is it made, where does it grow, where do you find it? For example, a reindeer farm, to visit it and then also see how the meat is then used for your dinner. So I think that's, in a way, the experience again that everybody's been talking of, and I thought the book was a very great example. But you don't only want to eat the final part or the final chapter where the murder is solved. You have to read the Hercule Poirot all the way from the beginning, and that's where does the food come from. So with the COVID-19, I think it will also be more that maybe you don't go to the restaurant anymore, but you find several locations where the food can be served. And it, of course, can be in the room, but you could have more pavilions and spread it out throughout more locations, so you can actually change your setting. So let's say normally you would go 1 or 2 nights to a hotel. Maybe now you think, okay, I'll travel only once a year and then stay there a bit longer. So then there's also actually a change of scenery, although the kitchen is just one in a smaller resort. So that's also something I think that we will see, is that to spread the hotel function like further over a bigger area. And I think one important thing is, like you've been mentioning, the practicality. So how do you clean surfaces? How does a buffet work? But I think there's a lot of behavioral science behind this as well. Like we can kind of direct people how they walk and what do they see along their route, so that they don't meet each other all the time, or that they don't have breakfast at the same time, or that they don't all end up at the same coffee maker. But you can actually influence it, positively influence it, by creating views, places to rest, moments to take, so that it doesn't feel too arranged, so that you're forced in a certain path, but that you have a choice. But that by taking that choice, and people are different, we actually spread naturally, and we don't come as close contact as is unsafe.
Certainly in resort environment, I think it might be slightly easier to execute on. In urban locations, it might be a little more difficult, but over to you, Sam.
Yes, I have a couple of questions here from the viewers. We have from Thailand, Tony, and he really enjoys this discussion that you are contributing to this. He has a question about the after COVID-19, he calls it. What will the size of the rooms or number of rooms or hotels that might be changing because of the pandemic? Do you have any feeling about, have you been approached by developers that they want to see a change this, or do you feel there's a change that in terms of room size and maybe the size of the hotel is becoming different?
Actually, I think the amount of rooms, so the size of the room is not the problem. And it was said before that the room itself is, I think, not the problem. It's the public spaces. So you might want to add another staircase or another elevator on a different point. So the hotspots or the meeting points or the crossing of lines, I think those you want to spread out. The room itself, I think, is not the first thing to solve. It's probably in the public spaces.
Yeah. Meriam, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I would think also, even in city hotels, I think the square meters, unfortunately for owners, will need to be increased even a little bit. When we see 22 square meters room, it's a very small room to sit in. I mean, that's the room where you go and sleep only. To me, even in city hotels, I think people are going to grab the food and stay in the place where they know it has been cleaned and sanitized before they arrive. That's their heaven. That's their, they're going to, that's a place where they feel the most comfortable. Mm-hmm. And they're not really going to look for socializing. So, I mean, not that much, not at the beginning. I think you arrive to your room, you have your food, and if you're sure it's clean, so you sit there because you don't want to go through all the, the temperature checking and all that. So size of rooms may have to increase a little bit.
And Gracinha, what is your comment about this size of room?
I agree, and I would add that the adventure of getting to your room with the lifts, the buttons, I think the beginning will be a little bit step by step in people getting used to what was very normal, and now are steps of, for some people, of anxiousness and fear. So I think the size of rooms in new projects should accommodate more comfort, because I'm definitely, the client will want to spend more time there and maybe bring in, as we were talking about, the spa service inside or other services that can add on to the experience.
Very good. Now we have Handan Duval who joined, he's watching us from LinkedIn, and he has a question to all of you. How can a hotel designer find inspiration in times of crisis?
Oh.
I think we find inspiration in anything, and if we can't, we look again.
Exactly.
Well said, Handa. That's a great question. All of us, and particularly we, look to designers for inspiration most of the time. But quite candidly, there's a lot of conversation going on how to keep positive in this pandemic time period. Thanks for joining the event.
Thank you for having us.
Very good. So this has been now a very good discussion, and we had several viewers in both YouTube and also LinkedIn, and many more will be joining us for what we call the replay. And so if you everyone who is watching now live, please go back and look at the replay because there might be some discussions going on. And
Sam, before you,
yeah,
sorry, but go ahead.
No, just over to you, Abid. Maybe you'll come.
Before you close, and I know we are approaching the hour, so before we close, back to our guest speakers. We like to end on a positive note, and Handan's question couldn't have been more appropriate. That how do you find inspiration? So share some personal stories, something that you might have learned about yourself, or something that you have observed in the community, some good things going on that we can end this session with. So we'll start out with Meriam, if you don't mind.
I mean, first of all, as designers, and I don't know about others, but as myself, we are resilient people. We find its inspiration in the birds that is singing outside, or a butterfly, or anything. So I think we are very resilient because we find inspiration everywhere. And to me, it has not been difficult because even if I don't have work, I create something. Second is because our job is not an easy one. And we all, I'm sure all of us here, we've been through ups and downs. So this is another down, and it's a fantastic challenge because maybe we're going to be part of a change somehow in the hospitality world, but in the world too. So this is a great moment.
Well said. Well said. Anything that you might have noticed in the industry that it can be uplifting?
Right now, it's what is uplifting is that everybody's gathering, everybody's communicating, and I think this is a great idea because usually designers are most of the time not collaborative. They don't work with each other. They have ego, and they well now I think we can survive only by sharing, collaborating, and this is the first step in the change. I love this.
Terrific. Well, thanks for that. And Meriam, by the way, only non-designers are supposed to say that designers don't collaborate, they have egos. So thank you for sharing that. Willem, over to you. Anything personal that you would like to share? Anything that you might have learned about yourself and going into your created space of mind that you came up with?
Well, I think changing your work environment, change is anyway always good, and unfortunately this is a change that nobody asked for. So but to change your rhythm and your routines, I think then you really learn yourself and you wonder why was I doing this the other way before, and isn't this something that I should always do this way? So it's also a way to look in the mirror and to realize that some change is good, and I think that goes for the industry, that goes for us as persons, and you might realize that beauty is actually close by. You don't have to go that far to have a great experience. So I think everything is exotic, and exotic can be the park close by, or Bali, or the Arctic Circle. So I think that's to appreciate the small, and that also goes for design or for the details, or when we think of the materials that we choose. I think that's something to appreciate everything that we have. That's something that definitely comes forward in times of crisis.
Fabulous. And last but certainly not least, Gracinha, anything that you would like to share? Any epiphanies that you might have had while you've had to stay at home?
I think I can mention two. One, I think as someone that loses sight, we are all going to come out of this with our senses enhanced, which if we are creators of emotions and experiences, this is the right moment to do this, because when people start coming out, the experiences will be much stronger to them. So this is, it's actually moving. what we were going to do from now onwards. And secondly, look at us all together in the four corners of the world. I think, this is bringing us all together. It will merge ideas. It will merge people professionally as well. It might bring up collaborations that would never have been if this hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. I think that's a great ending to our session. Thank you to our viewers for joining on all different platforms. Particularly thanks to our guests for joining and sharing their insight.
Thank you.
Hospitality Talks, again, was initiated because we wanted to bring these discussion points up so that we can all actively talk about them. I think Sam and I, after all these sessions, Sam and I are going to collaborate on writing a book on all the things that we have learned. So we might be asking all of you to contribute a chapter in that book. But really appreciate your insight. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for participating. And I look forward to keeping in touch and seeing you in cyberspace in the immediate future, but also in person before too long. Stay healthy. Over to you, Sam.
Well, I also want to extend a big thank you to my new friends, Meriam and Gracinha, who I haven't met before, and Willem. He's a good friend, so we chat on a regular basis, so it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait for the moment to come and visit the hotels that you've been designing and to really understand what's behind this inspiration that you have gone through. And I think this week is very exciting from many point of view that we are having architects and interior design architects. It's like what I call the design week. So we have the next segment will be on Friday. We also have international designers joining us to bringing their inspiration and their point of view about design, and also what is, so to speak, the post-pandemic time. So with that few words, I just want to thank you very much again, and stay safe, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.